What if I told you that one of the richest and most beautiful cities in the world was brought to its knees, not by an army, not by fire, but by something so small no one could see it? This is the story of Venice during the Black Death. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine. It is the year 1347. Venice is at the height of its glory, the queen of the Adriatic, a city of marble palaces that seem to float on the lagoon, a city of gondolas gliding under stone bridges, of marketplaces bursting with silks, spices, and perfumes from the east. In the Piazza San Marco, merchants from every corner of the known world argue, bargain, and celebrate. Gold coins clink, church bells echo. The air is filled with the smell of roasted fish and fresh bread. Venice is not just a city, it is a world stage, a hub of power, wealth, and culture, the pride of Italy. But beneath this glittering surface, whispers are already spreading. Whispers of a strange disease that has struck faraway lands. In the caravans that cross Asia, in villages along the Silk Road, entire families are said to vanish overnight. Some say it began with the Mongols, who carried death with them as they thundered across the steppes. Some claim it started in the East, in places so distant they sound more like myth than reality. At first, these are just rumors. Venice, after all, thrives on rumors. Sailors' tales, merchants' boasts, gossip from distant ports. Why should this one be different? Then the ships arrive. One by one, vessels sail into the lagoon, their sails drooping, their decks strangely quiet. At first, people rush to the docks, eager to unload cargo. But instead of bustling sailors, they find shadows of men, hollow-eyed, stumbling, coughing, their skin marked with black swellings, terrible to look at. Some collapse on the planks before they can even speak. And with them, the invisible invader disembarks. The plague. Now, stop and think. What would you do? What would your neighbors do if suddenly death walked in silently through the harbor gates? In Venice, fear spreads even faster than the sickness itself. Families barricade themselves inside their homes. The streets that once echoed with music and laughter fall silent. The city of masks and masquerades now wears only one mask: panic. But here is the cruel irony. Venice's greatness was built on openness, on welcoming the world, on daring to trade with distant lands. The sea had always been its shield and its strength. Yet now, every ship that brought riches might also bring death. The very veins that fed the city's heart had become the arteries of destruction. The Republic's leaders scramble for answers. Doctors are powerless, priests overwhelmed, ordinary people consumed by dread. The city that once seemed untouchable is suddenly fragile, as if the lagoon itself could not protect it from what is coming. This is how the story of Venice and the Black Death begins, with a city glittering like a jewel, only to discover that even jewels can crack. But what exactly was this enemy? Where did it come from, and why did it strike with such force? To understand the panic of Venice, we must first understand the plague itself.
If you're enjoying this journey so far, don't forget to like and subscribe. Your support helps us keep these stories alive.
What was this force that could silence an empire of merchants and sailors? The answer lay in something almost invisible, a bacterium called Yersinia pestis. Its story begins far away, in the steppes of Central Asia. Imagine endless grasslands, windswept and vast, where nomads rode under the banners of the Mongol Empire. These warriors controlled the Silk Road, the arteries of trade connecting China, India, the Middle East, and Europe. With caravans of silk, spices, and precious stones came another passenger, the plague. Hidden in the blood of fleas, carried by rats, it spread wherever humans traveled. In 1346, the plague arrived at the Black Sea, at the trading city of Kaffa, a Genoese colony. There, a grim episode unfolded. The Mongol army laid siege to the city. When their camp was struck by the sickness, they turned desperation into weapon, hurling infected corpses over the city walls. The defenders, terrified, fled aboard ships, carrying not just themselves, but the invisible enemy with them. Those ships sailed west, to Sicily, to Genoa, and eventually to Venice. When the plague reached Europe, it was like a storm without warning. Fevers rose suddenly, lymph nodes swelled into painful buboes, dark blotches spread under the skin, earning it the name, the Black Death. Death often came within days. No medicine, no prayer, no ritual seemed to stop it. Venice was particularly vulnerable. Think about it. Narrow alleys, crowded homes, markets where people pressed shoulder to shoulder, ships unloading every day. The rats thrived in warehouses stacked with grain. Fleas leapt from fur to flesh, and within weeks the sickness spread from dock workers to nobles, from gondoliers to senators. A Tuscan chronicler wrote of burials so hurried that the dead were layered in trenches like lasagna, a body, then earth, then another body. In Venice, too, the cemeteries filled beyond measure. Bells tolled endlessly, their sound blending with the cries of the grieving. And yet, the true devastation was not only physical, it was emotional, social. Families abandoned the sick in terror. Mothers left their children. Husbands locked doors against their wives. The bonds of society unraveled, thread by fragile thread. Pause here. Have you ever felt the kind of fear that makes you question everything? When you start wondering if you can even trust those closest to you? That was Venice in 1348. But history is never only destruction. Even in the darkest hour, seeds of change are planted. In Venice, those seeds would grow into something radical, an idea that would shape the world fights disease even today. Because the leaders of the Republic began to ask, if the plague arrives on ships, what if the ships are stopped? From that desperate question was born a concept so simple, yet so revolutionary, it still exists in our vocabulary. Quarantine. 40 days. 40 giorni. That was the time ships had to remain isolated, away from the city, before anyone could disembark. It was not perfect. It did not stop the dying, but it marked the beginning of a new way of thinking, that perhaps humans could act, not just suffer, that perhaps disease had rules, and if rules could be understood, they could be resisted. Venice was bleeding, but it was also learning. Still, this knowledge came at a terrible price. By the end of the epidemic, perhaps half the city was gone. Palaces stood empty. Gondolas drifted without rowers. The proud republic, accustomed to triumphs, was forced to confront its own fragility. And yet, Out of this trial, Venice would not only survive, it would emerge with new ideas, new institutions, and the changed vision of the world. In our final chapter, we will see how the plague transformed Venice's society, its politics, and even the course of European history. When the Black Death loosened its grip, Venice was not the same city it had been. Half its people were gone, entire families erased. The streets that once rang with the voices of merchants and sailors were hushed. And yet, out of the silence, something new began to grow. The Republic created permanent health boards, the first of their kind in Europe. Quarantine islands, the lazaretti, were built in the lagoon where ships and travelers were held before entering the city. Venice had turned fear into policy, panic into invention. But the transformation went deeper than medicine. The plague shook the rigid order of medieval society. With so many dead, workers suddenly mattered. Labor became precious. The poor gained leverage. Old hierarchies cracked, and new ideas about freedom, responsibility, and power began to circulate. Some historians even argue that the plague helped propel Europe out of the Middle Ages. Without it, feudalism might have lasted longer. Without it, perhaps the Renaissance and the modern world that followed would have taken a different path. Here is the paradox. The Black Death was destruction on an unimaginable scale, and yet it also became a turning point. Venice, the city that once seemed doomed, showed that survival sometimes depends not on strength or wealth, but on adaptability. So what does this mean for us today? We too live in a world of connections. Airplanes are our galleys. Global trade is our lifeblood. And just as in Venice, the very openness that makes us thrive also makes us vulnerable. The story of Venice is a reminder that every age has its plague, its trial, its invisible enemy. But it is also a reminder of resilience, that even in fear, humans can imagine, they can create, they can adapt. Venice survived. Scarred, yes, changed forever, but alive. And that is the legacy of the Black Death in The Queen of the Adriatic, a story of terror, of loss, and of the quiet, stubborn spark of survival. If you enjoyed this journey, remember to like and subscribe. Your support is what keeps these stories alive.